Hello and welcome to B&T TV, where we're going to be talking all about people. So I'm joined now by Pauly and Jess from the Publicis group. So a lot of businesses will say that they're people first and everything like that. But what does being head of people, for example, actually mean in a nutshell?
Okay, so I see it as a really privileged role, actually. So I believe that I'm here to make sure that we create a really empowering, engaging environment for our people to do their best work, and also really partner with the CEO, Michael Rebello, to make sure that we have the best talent in Publicis, the capabilities and skills we need really for now and the future to create that sustainable business.
I'm going to come back. So I think the word engagement, I definitely agree that's so important. It kind of can be one of them words that's sort of used a lot. I mean, what does kind of like being really engaged actually look like day to day? You know, what does maybe not being engaged, and not in a marital sense, but in terms of in the work sense, what does not being engaged look like?
Fundamentally, it means you're not happy. So I think to be engaged with something, you have to feel inspired, you have to feel motivated, you have to feel happy. So if you can create a workplace that does that and actually encourage growth and happiness and motivation in people, then that's what I mean by engaged. I think it's really important for all of us as individuals in any part of our life that we feel that way in order to actually be productive and produce the best work we can.
And Jess, I know you're head of diversity and inclusion. What does that mean to you? What do you kind of consider to be the crux of your role?
Yeah, so I have been part of Publicis Group for 6 years and most recently have taken on the head of DE&I role. In terms of that, the work that I'm doing is collectively bringing the broader strategy together across Australia and New Zealand, working with our employee resource groups to drive different celebrations and events, looking at policy work that we might be changing, also then supporting from a cultural perspective how we can ensure people are turning up and really feeling like their authentic self. I think to add to Pauly's point in terms of how people feel engaged, I think also one of the reasons and the reason why I've been here for the length of time and also how people feel engaged is that they can turn up and feel themselves and feel like they're able to express who they are personally and professionally in the workplace setting. And that's something in my role, I suppose, is one of the key drivers to make sure people can, from all walks of life, feel like they can be themselves.
It's interesting because you mentioned happiness there, you mentioned authenticity, and I know you can tell me, I can't remember the name of it, but you've introduced this initiative that's like, happy life, not just happy kind of like working world.
Yeah,
and
life experience.
Yeah, oh, that's it, happy life experience. I mean, I find this, I love LinkedIn, for example, but I get in loads of debates with people where people are saying, well, you go to work, and it's not about being happy and everything like that. You just kind of go to work, and then some people kind of love sharing themselves in that professional setting and things like that. I mean, why did you kind of, is it the responsibility of the workplace to create that happy life?
So I think there was a seismic shift with COVID, which we all know and we've spoken about a lot. But I think as well as the change of where we work and how we work, individuals really looked inside themselves to go, what is it about my life that is a priority to me? And I actually think prior to that, people probably didn't do that so much. So what's happened over the last couple of years is they've come out of that period really being attuned to what they want as an individual and what their priorities are. And that's going to be different for me, for you, for Jess. We're going to have different priorities. So it's really interesting for organisations. So if you think about how organisations used to approach their people, it was all around employee experience. So let's make work life better. Right? So now this idea of life experience that we talk about is how does work fit into your entire life? So it's very connected. And I think gone are the days where organisations can create one-size-fits-all approaches to people because we are all so different. So I think the more that organisations can respond and look a little deeper into what they're actually offering their people and really connect into their life and their experiences, the better people are going to respond to that organisation. And part of Jess's role is actually looking at that. So how can we actually offer lots of things to lots of people?
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, so we worked closely with our employee resource groups who are collective groups of people across a whole range of brands and levels and different capabilities where they have perhaps a particular thing in common that they're most passionate about. So for us, we have Enable that supports people with disability. We have Egalite, which is French for equality, which focuses on our LGBTQ community. We have Embrace, which is about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And we also have Viva Women, which focuses on women. And about 18 months ago, we engaged with them to talk more about how do we walk the walk instead of just talking the talk, I suppose. And we launched a number of different leave policies to support people. So that's included things like gender affirmation leave, fertility treatment leave, miscarriage leave. We've extended compassionate leave beyond the statutory requirements. We also launched flexible public holidays, where up to 6 public holidays in the year, if they don't personally align with your religious values or perhaps what you feel connected to, then you can swap them for a day that's important to you. And the last one we did was a really important one, where we made a shift from sick leave, what's historically been known as sick leave, being very much when you are physically ill and you've broken a leg and therefore you need to take a day off, where there had been stigma around not feeling like you could take sick leave if you were mentally run down or struggling. And so we have reframed that to be called wellbeing leave, where we absolutely know that wellbeing comes through the lens of physical or mental wellbeing, and that people are encouraged to use those days when they need a break, perhaps from a mental wellbeing perspective. And so they're ways, I suppose, that we've really looked at how do we ensure that that life experience is acknowledged, it isn't a taboo topic to talk about, and I suppose on a global scale, we've also launched the Working with Cancer program.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've heard of this, but at Davos this year, the World Economic Forum, Tersadun launched Working with Cancer globally. This came about because he was diagnosed with cancer last April. And as a global CEO, he literally sent out a video to 100,000 people letting them know what had happened to him. And it was a very heartfelt video that really touched a lot of people. He then received thousands of emails from across Publicis Group employees, really just voicing the way that it made them feel, because a lot of them had been through cancer, didn't feel like they could talk about it. They'd seen other people or colleagues go through it, or people outside our organisation. And he made a personal commitment at that point that if he did get out the other end, which he has with the spring in his step, that he would personally take this movement on with Publicis and partner with people around the world to make it happen. So as it stands, we have about 625 global organisations and organisations around the world that have signed up that are impacting about 21 million people. And so if we take that back down to Publicis and what it means for our staff, if you think of cancer, 1 in 2 people in Australia will be diagnosed with cancer. So we're saying to our staff, if you are and you're unable to work, we'll pay you for up to 12 months.
Wow, yeah.
And keep your role. So you don't have to worry about your health or your finance, you worry about your health. And you don't need to put your focus onto your work, or do you have a job, or the insecurities around that. You focus on getting better. And so it was a really big statement, and there's lots of things around that we've got to support our people. So it's just another example of how you actually look at your people. I don't call them employees, they're people.
Human resources.
Well, a recent...
We're not called
human resources.
That is the words. I hate the term human resources. Sorry, I probably shouldn't say, yeah.
But in a recent Gartner survey, it said that 82% of employees want to be known as a person, not an employee.
It sounds, yeah.
It does sound obvious. But as organisations, if you think back even 4 years ago, it was a very different scenario.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, you mentioned about cancer and things like that, and I know myself and other people I know have had relatives with it. You find out this news and your whole world turns upside down, and then you have to go into work and reply to a client's email or something that, it's that like very serious moment, and then kind of, go back to work and things like that. And I know, a lot of people, they might have something happen, or they might have, say, a bad mental health day, and they might be nervous about actually telling their boss, this is going on for me, maybe I might underperform, or I might not be able to come into work, etc. And I know there's some skepticism of leaders, it's like, well, you say this in the policy, but if I ring up and say this, how will that actually be received? I mean, how do you actually create a culture where people actually do feel safe to be honest about stuff like that?
I think at Publicis, we talk about having humanity at the heart. So we always look at what's right for our people, And I think if you do that, and it goes back to what I said originally around what my role is and what we do here, is around how do we lead with that first? How do we lead with what's right? And if we lead with humanity, I actually think it ends up really well. I mean, you can't be perfect, and you can try, but I think that's where it comes about. And I think one of the things I love to do when people come from other organisations into our organisation is I'll go up to them and say, so tell me what's different. What's different about Publicis? What's different about our agencies that you go into, like a Spark or a Saatchi's or a Starcom or whatever it may be? And they actually said, what you say, I feel. So I feel it. I feel it in the way that my colleague talks to me, my manager talks to me. I feel it in the way that when myself, Mike Rebello, and Henri, who's our CFO, we do quarterly Q&As. We are so open and transparent. People can ask questions and we just answer them. We stay there and just answer them on the spot. And so I think there's a lot of different things we do, but not just in programs or anything. It's actually how we behave. And I think that makes the biggest difference. And we're always an organisation who wants to make the change first before we go external. So we do a lot of work about getting it right first and making sure it's working and people feel it before we talk about it.
And we were talking a bit here sort of about leadership and that top level of change in the culture. You know, we've also got at the other end, we've got Gen Z or Gen Z, as I would say, as a Brit, who, you know, they're very much like that culture. I mean, I did sales for a year once. And I remember one of the sales coaches said that she would have licked a toilet seat to hit her target. She started her career. Like Gen Z are not like that. You know, Gen Z, they're that kind of culture of overtime, you're doing anything, you know, to get ahead of stuff. It doesn't seem to be what they want or what they do sort of thing. I mean, how are you kind of making Gen Z feel welcome or maybe letting them shape the workplace, and kind of what changes are they bringing?
I think it's really interesting because I think this year in our business, we've kind of hit 20% Gen Z. So for the first time, it's becoming quite a prominent population. And if you look at the differences perhaps between the millennials and Gen Z, millennials tenure is around 3.4, Gen Z's around 1.4. Wow. So there's like a massive drop of 2 years. A lot of the insights we've seen is they want radical flexibility. It's not even negotiable. It's just a thing. And as Jess mentioned before, I think, you know, this is because they've come out of uni through COVID and come into the workplace. So it's a different new era we're working in. The other thing is they want to be inspired. So they want to be inspired in their role, or they will only last 1.5 years. So I think it's interesting for us, and I think in organisations it puts the pressure on us, which I think is fantastic, because I always like to be moving, we like to be moving, is around how do we make the roles in our industry more inspiring? How do we use AI? How do we use different ways to remove a lot of those repeatable automated tasks so people can actually use their creative thinking? And so it is inspiring and motivating. And I think that's how they can help guide us. It is a new way of working. You know, AI will be part of our workplace. And I think the Gen Zers are really going to help us get there much quicker than we would if they weren't around.
And final question now, it's one I'm going to put both of you on the spot. What inspires or energizes, what is inspiring or energizing you right now?
For me at the moment, the thing that we're working on, we launched Enable, like I mentioned before, our employee resource group for people with disability, invisible or visible. And one of the first things that we've started working on is partnering with the Australian Network on Disability to craft our first access and inclusion plan. And I'm really excited about that. Disability has long been a area of inclusion that has fallen behind when we think about other areas of inclusion, and it's absolutely time to be working in that space. I'm really excited to craft that plan and to work towards more inclusive recruitment in that space in the future. So that's really something I'm looking forward to into next year.
And for me, it's all around this new era of work. I love the fact that we're having to flip things on its head, pull it apart, reimagine it, innovate. I think that's really exciting for me as a professional, our team, and us as an organisation. I think Publicis has always tried to be a bit of ahead of the pack with transformation. So it's how we look to the way we're working now, the pressure that Gen Z is putting on us, but also AI and how we can incorporate that as a member of our workforce. I just think it's fascinating. So I'm constantly absorbing as much as I can, so we can start kind of pulling it apart and putting it back together in a way that's going to really propel us into this new era of work.
Thank you both for joining me today. And thank you for watching B&T TV.